Hi folks, my name is Susan Paneluk with Kooky Worm Composting, and I've been vermicasting now for about 20 years, and for about the last 10 years I have been working with all kinds of different systems and decided to build my own system because most of everything on the market is plastic. It's not breathable enough for the worms. There wasn't enough room, enough capacity. It was very physically demanding and hard work, a lot of them, packing stuff around. And what I've developed is the Worm Hut, which is a breathable, waterproof flow-through system. And right now there's so much renewed interest in growing your own nutrient-dense food, food scarcity. There's talk of, we just need to feed ourselves more nutrient-dense food, and everything about its soil regeneration and how do we get the best food possible and grow that for ourselves. So it's all about the microbes. I work with farmers, I work with farmers' fields. So we don't use fertilizers anymore. We're using worm casting extracts. And it's about the microbes. We don't have a fertility issue in the world today. We actually have a microbe issue. So we need to rebuild that soil, and that's what worms do. They've been on the planet way, way longer than we have, of course. So with the Worm Hut here, the first step, we're going to do a live demonstration today because that's easy for people to follow. What I do is I have a laundry basket and I put a large garbage bag in it, and I fill it up with shredded newspaper and cardboard. Everything I have around the house, the Amazon boxes, just take off the tape. The worms love this because of the glue in it. Your toilet paper rolls, your paper towel, your white paper, they will eat, but put it in very small concentrations because it's been bleached and it will ball up and the worms can't get into it. And then you've just got your household papers. Your envelopes, they will eat those as well. They just won't pay your bills. So I keep this right next and I shred it. And if you don't have a good paper shredder, just moisten the newspaper or the cardboard and it's easy to rip in 1-inch squares. So that's what I do. Then once this is completely filled, I take it and I moisten everything. So I will usually add rainwater. If you're in a city, you want to let that water sit for a bit so the chlorine dissipates. I'll let it sit for sometimes 2-3 days. I roll it around to get everything nice and moist. And then I'll poke 2 or 3 holes in the bottom to just let excess moisture drain out. Composting worms like a moisture of about 70%. And how you can tell if it's 70% is you do a squeeze test. So you go in and you take your bedding and you put it in your hand, make a nice little ball, and squeeze very, very hard. And you should feel the water come through, just start to seep through your knuckles and maybe your drop or two. That tells you you've got perfect moisture level. So once I've got my bag of shredded paper, I dump it into the Worm Hut then, as you can see here. This Worm Hut gets to be about 200 pounds when it's in full operation. Now, the next thing you want to consider is your stand. We have the corners available. You can order on the website, and then you just go to Home Hardware or Home Depot and buy Schedule 40 PVC, and that works just fine. The ultimate stand is if you use wooden doweling with a wooden stand, so you can put it on 360-degree rotating wheels. And that way it is very, very easy to move, less easy to move when you have it on the PVC stand. So we've done step 1 is preparing the bedding. Step 2, when you get your hut, you'll have to tie the bottom nice and tight. There's a nice long cord, so wrap it 2 or 3 times around the bottom and then put a bow in it so it's not going into your little container at the bottom. This container is to catch the drips. Now initially you might have some water in there, but when this is running perfectly and well balanced, you shouldn't have really any dripping coming out. Just put it there as a precautionary measure. And the Worm Hut does have a nice zipper on top, so it keeps any flies or bugs out, keeps moisture in, and very, very simple to use. Now, the next step is adding your worms. When you purchase your bag of worms, this is the bag that we suggest for the worm hut. This bag is about 14 pounds, which makes it, the reason it's 14 pounds is we put food in here for the worms, plus we do not trommel our worms. I don't believe in trommeling. It disorientates them. They get scattered. They don't eat for a month. When you buy worms by the pound and they come in peat moss, it's a month before they even settle down. So I don't want that. I want you to get off to the best start possible and have the best experience. So we put in here castings right from our bed, so you get babies, different size, ages of worms. They aren't counted. There's approximately 3,000, if not more, in this bag, and which is about 3 pounds of worms. And then you get all of, which is equally important, all of the microbes that the worms are used to living in, right in this bag. They've got good food. Dump it in here, cover it up with about 1 inch of dry bedding. Let the worms be for about a week at this point. Some people will say, well, no, I just want to start economically with the small little bag. This isn't enough worms to even really get this started that well, so you will have to have tons of patience. Okay? Now, when we've got the worms in, we leave them for a week. Worms really don't like to be disturbed, and the less you disturb them, the better. So when it comes now for feeding, a week after you've started your worm hut and everything's nice and moist, you can go in, and I don't suggest that the mistake, number one mistake most everybody makes is they overfeed. Now don't forget that all this bedding is food for your worms too, and they will eat all this bedding. So there's tons in here. Some people will say, yes, but this is such a big hut and it's only my husband and I at home now. Well, don't forget, this is all food for the worms as well. So even if you're not producing lots of table scraps and veggie scraps and that. So for food, I've got all that listed on the website, which foods and everything, but start off with a baggie full. And what I always want you to get in the habit of doing, because the second most common mistake is people don't add enough carbon to their system. So what I want you to do is always add about 1 inch to 2 inches of dry carbon, shredded carbon on the bottom, then add your food scraps. Now there's about 80% moisture in this food scrap, so that'll moisten up your dry paper there. Then what you do is just take a spray bottle. This is just water, and I'm going to spray the top a little bit, but I'm mostly trying to spray around the sides of the hut because this hut is so breathable, it'll dry out around the sides, and that's about sufficient to keep it nice and moist. Once your worms grow and populate, and they will self-populate, once they get to be so much of a population in here, they will quit reproducing. But this is how much you can actually add. My daughter adds this container full to her worm hut every single week and does very well with it. You just need to remember that you want to add at least twice as much bedding as you are food, at least, even 3 times. If you can do that. That's why this system's so great. It's got all the capacity to be able to hold that with you, and you don't have mess and paper all over. So now we've talked about the feeding of the worms. Feed them once a week. Now what we want to do is talk about the harvesting. So you just keep doing that. Every week you feed, cover with your shredded paper, newspaper, close it up. The next week feed, and in 6 months' time will be your first harvest. So what I do for the harvesting, yes, you do have to get down on your hands and knees. You might get yourself a little bit of a cushion for your knees. And I always have 2 dish pans. And what I'll do then, backing up, this little container here should never have hardly any moisture in it. If it is, you've overfed or overwet. And that's what's nice about this. You can't overwet this because it'll drip into here. Just take and dump it back into the container. Now, when I'm harvesting, I put this underneath. I will untie my bow here. I will open up the bottom funnel. This will not just completely fall out because it's got the weight in there, and this has been cone-shaped sewn. and so it will hold the castings in. You open up, you take in your hand, and that's why I like the 360-degree stand, because while I'm in my one position, I can turn the wheels, and I'm just in that position, clean out, and I'll probably get one, and as you go on, 2 container dishpanfuls of castings. Now, for your first harvest, you will get about a gallon, an ice cream pail full of castings, and there will be a fair bit of moistened newspaper and cardboard in there. Don't worry about that. Take it once it comes out of there. Stop once you see too much paper coming out or too many worms, and then just take and dump it into a 5-gallon pail that's got air holes drilled in it. And what you do is just use that for your storage. Cover with a piece of moistened newspaper, put the top on, and you're finished. 15 minutes later. What's beautiful about this, the castings coming out of here, is that the worms are fed and kept up in the feeding zone here. So when I harvest, when I have the castings coming out of the bottom of the bag here, there's basically little to no worms in it, nothing to worry about, and you can just go right from there into your garden. The second harvest, 3 months after that, you will get about 2 gallons of castings, less paper, less shredded cardboard. And on the third harvest, you will get about 4 gallons of castings, which is incredible. That is more to do, that's more than enough to do a very, very large garden, because you just put it, and I'll be doing a video on how to use the vermicastings. And then just tie it back up and keep going. So you shred your paper, you keep adding lots of carbon. Carbon's your friend. Keep it moist. Feed it about once a week, and harvest every 3 months after that once it gets going. Super simple, super easy, no effort. And what's absolutely fabulous about this system is no smell. And I don't have to do a lot of physical time, energy work. Some people actually keep this right in their kitchen because there is no smell, and it's so handy for them. So thanks for watching.